Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast with Jay Gordon Duncan. And if you're wondering why the J, the answer is I'm not a bagpipe player. And if that joke doesn't make any sense, I encourage you to check out episode 0, where I explain that joke, as well as the purpose of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast, where we talk about faith, family, fitness, finances, and sometimes fun. Well, friends, you might notice that a few things are different. First of all, I imagine that the audio quality is 100 times better than what you're used to listening to. There's a reason for that, and I'll get to it. And some of you might even be watching this podcast. This is the first time I've recorded it on video, and hopefully some of you who like to watch things on YouTube or maybe on Facebook channels, we've got it there. But first and foremost, this is the 400th, that's 400 episodes of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast. And I've had episodes that have had over 1,000 listens, and I've had some that have had about 20. But no matter what, 30 plus thousand of you have listened to this podcast in the last 3+ years. And I've just got to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Just this past week, I had someone come up to me and said, I listened to your podcast on such and such. And it just means a ton. I just can't thank you enough that you would listen to me ramble. And I know you love it when I have a guest, especially when Emma is on. So I've just got to say thank you for hanging in there for 400 episodes. And I think almost all of them are still up. A couple of them have been taken down for this reason or not, but most of them are still up. And again, I want to say thank you. Now, a couple of things. Here is why this episode sounds so good, and I'm actually on video. I've got to thank Pohanka Nissan. They have an incredible studio. I've used their audio a couple of times when I was interviewed by Angela Rivers and a couple of other times. And I've just got to say thank you so much that they get me a chance to record here. And Riley interviewed me a couple of times. It's just meant a lot. And then also they're providing not only the audio, but also the video. And none of this, just Shandell is awesome. She is producing all this. So I got to say, hey, if she was sitting in front of me, I would probably talk to her back and forth in conversation the whole time. She is great. But guys, I'm excited. And I thought, what do I do? Now, I've still got a couple of those interviews in the works, a couple of them that I'm working on. And I thought about pushing, trying to get it to the 400th episode. But instead, I changed my mind. I've got those scheduled for later on in the first quarter. And as always, you know I'm working on that one, that big fish. I've been chasing not one, but now 2 folks really hard. And I've got a couple of interviews in the community lined up as well, here in the Fredericksburg community. So if this experiment goes well here at the Pohanka Nissan studio, what's going to happen is I'll start recording here hopefully more frequently, maybe even each week, and start bringing on guests, and we'll do video interviews. We're going to wait and see how all that goes, but right now I'm just thankful to be here. So I thought, what in the world am I going to do for my 400th episode? Of course, I thought about bringing Emma on, but I didn't get her permission in time. She's been the most frequent guest. I think Emma's been on here, 15 times. And as always, you can listen to the podcast I have with her called You're Entitled to Your Opinion. But right now, I thought, well, let's do a retrospect. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm bringing up clips from older episodes, though you got to go back and listen to episodes like the multiple times I've talked to Pete Evick. One particular was when I interviewed Steve Alton. Steve Alton wrote the book Meg, which is that Jason Statham movie about the giant shark. And guys, you know my guilty pleasure is giant shark movies. It was great talking to him and a couple others coming up. But right now, what I thought I would do is the 10 things that I've learned since podcasting. And I don't usually have notes. I usually just run this off the top of my head, but I actually took a couple of minutes. If on video, you'll see I've got one of our capitalized marketing postcards with a few notes on the back, and I've got our swanky new mug that I hope to be handing out to folks soon. But what I thought I would do is I'd run through these 10 things I've learned since I started podcasting and tell some stories along the way. So again, thank you guys. If you like this episode, like it, share it, subscribe, throw it up on your stories. Hopefully being on video here is not too embarrassing. I got to figure out, am I slumped over? Should I sit up? But we'll figure all that stuff out. But without further delay, let's jump into the 10 things I've learned since podcasting for 400 episodes in no particular order. This is not a David Letterman top 10. So let me start with the first one. The first is, if you don't take yourself too seriously, podcasting is fun. I was talking to some folks in the community today, and they were thinking about maybe starting a podcast for their business. And I told them a couple of things. First of all, you've got to do it every single week. Like, you can't just skip episodes. But secondly, be willing to fail. Be willing to put some bad episodes out there. When we listen to those incredible podcasts in the queue, and they're by movie stars and people that we admire, they've got full production teams. They edit out every They've got more studio equipment than you can imagine. And we don't always get that opportunity. So if you want a podcast, do it. Go on to Anchor FM, download that app, get started. Be like me right now, I'm trying not to burp. It all happens like that. But just be willing to have fun with it. Give it yourself an opportunity to just express your opinion or interview people. My third anniversary episode, I interviewed Ron Keel. Ron Keel's the lead singer of the 80s metal band Keel with their hit Right to Rock. And you know what? He came on for my third anniversary. He didn't know me. I just pursued him online, and he said, yeah. I mean, he was the lead singer of Keel and even Black Sabbath at one point in time. And as an 80s metal kid, it was a blast. And so if you don't take yourself too seriously, podcasting is so much fun. You know, I listen to my episodes back. It's difficult sometimes when you hear what you have to say, but I've also got this moment-by-moment history. And then in the mornings when I come up and I check my Facebook memories, it'll be like, you shared this episode or you shared this episode. And you know what? I've interviewed friends, movie stars, they go on, and there's really special interviews with my kids. And if you don't take it too seriously, don't stress out. Record a couple of fun episodes, get started, pop them up there, and it really is a great moment. Part of it is a time capsule. Part of it is self-branding or marketing, or maybe it's just something that you feel like you've got to share with the world. But I just can't tell you enough. If you don't take yourself too seriously, podcasting can be a blast. And this is episode 400. We're getting ready to have our 4-year anniversary. And I've got other podcasts, the You're Entitled to Your Opinion, the Capitalize Your Best, and the Church Training Partners. And you know what? I have a blast doing it. To some extent, I'd love to do it full time. But this is part of what I do personally and marketing-wise. I love it. So don't take yourself too seriously. Get out there, record a couple episodes, and start your podcast. Let me know when you do. And I promise you, I'll give it a listen. So, number one, if you don't take yourself too seriously, podcasting is fun. Now, 2 is the other side. If you are honest in your podcast, unfortunately, you are going to get hateful feedback. It's just like social media. I remember the first time I did a TikTok, and don't laugh. The first comment I got was, man, you really need braces. That was the first comment I ever got. And listen, I know I need braces. It's just the reality of the world out there, right? My kids need braces. I'm working on them first. But the whole point is, if you podcast and you're honest, someone is going to give you mean and maybe even hateful feedback. And all I can tell you is you just can't worry about them, because there's no way that your opinion is going to make everybody happy. You don't even agree with yourself half the time. You change your mind from waking up to after your cup of coffee, and that's okay. And I've actually had to go back and make corrections. I remember one time I did a podcast about my guilty pleasure novels, the Mac Bolan the Executioner, these action spy novels. And I did that was the podcast, my guilty pleasure reading. Well, the wife of the author, who at that time was still alive, messaged me, the wife of the author, and said, you got these 2 stats wrong. Well, I was horrified. I immediately messaged her, apologized, and the very next episode, I had to say something. Now, she was kind and let me know my mistake. You just got to know, though, if you put your opinion out there, someone is not going to like it. But listen, if there's no risk, there's no reward. It's okay. You know, you create the parameters of your podcast. There are things I do not talk about on this show purposefully. I don't want to talk about them because I know that it gets nothing but vitriol. And you know what those topics are. I barely even mention them by name. So if you put your opinion out there, it's going to be fun, but you're probably going to get some negative feedback. And you're just going to have to prepare yourself for that. It's part of the process. It's part of the platform. And the more popular you get, the more feedback you're going to get. I promise you that. So back when I was at Evident Grace and publishing my sermons on here, I promise you, everything from your theology is wrong in this area to your hateful, for whatever the case may be, it's okay. Just remember, you're being brave enough to put yourself out there on the platform. Have fun with it, but you do have to be prepared for some criticism. Okay, so those are the first 2. Number 3, you can meet some really cool folks. This is my only opportunity to name drop. I try not to do it. And you know what? I've reached out to some big names and gotten no's. And usually the people I interview are not, A-list celebrities necessarily, but they're people that I want to talk to. And I assume, well, I want to talk to them. Maybe somebody else does. Like I said, Ron Keel, 80s. He's more than a hair metal rock star, but he was at that point in time. And he was produced by Gene Simmons of Kiss, who is one of my favorite musicians. And we got to talk about all that. Ron Keel played with Yngwie Malmsteen, and some of you know who that, some who isn't, my favorite guitar player. He was so gracious, he told stories. I'm now friends with Pete Evick, who's the guitar player for Bret Michaels. We talk all the time. Came through the podcast. I just put it out there. Authors. I remember at the height of the Me Too movement, I had an opportunity to go speak to a seminary president in our area and say, what are you going to say to respond to that? I know that's dipping into some controversial waters, but I wanted to know, hey, how is this being addressed? How are you guys addressing it? And so it went really well because it wasn't a combative situation. All in all, I usually just reach out to whatever I'm interested in, and maybe you guys are interested and maybe not. I've interviewed friends here in the area. I went back and interviewed old buddies from camp. I just really cool folks like Paul Cummings and folks like that. I just wanted to hear from them and have a one-on-one. My friend Jonathan Grawl is a painter who I absolutely love. And I've got his art all over my house. He's been one of my friends since 1990, maybe one of my oldest friends. And I just interviewed him. It was great. Just sat down and talked. And you know what? You find out and learn different things when you sit down, you've got a microphone, or you're on a Zoom, and you're like, hey, I'm going to interview you. You get to meet some cool folks. And as your platform grows, you get an opportunity. Like now I get to say, hey, there's 30,000 listeners out there when I approach someone, and it gives them maybe a second chance to go, maybe I do want to talk about them. Now, I've had some big misses, and I don't do that. I don't tell you who missed out or who no-showed. That does happen. So I try not to tell you ahead of time. And I'm going to still track some of them down. I think some of them are out of reach. But you know what? I've got some invites out there. I'm going to keep at it. I just try to interview the people I like. And we go from there. Nothing combative. We're not doing back and forth arguments or anything like that. So if you have an interview format, you're really going to get a chance to meet some really, really cool people. So that's a great part. Number 4, people will listen and appreciate what you have to say, and you'll never know it. You might say, well, Gordon, what good is it? Well, remember, if thousands of people or even tens of people are listening to your podcast, for the most part, you're not going to know who they are. The subscriber feedback you get doesn't give you their name. And so each one of those numbers represents a person. Maybe there's some re-listens. But you look down and you're like, wait a minute, 25 people listen to my podcast. You don't know who they are for the most part. But you got to know that they're listening. And when they subscribe, you're like, wow, this person likes this podcast enough to have it delivered to their phone, in my case, every single Monday. And you're going to have an impact on them. And if they're still subscribing and still listening, that impact grows. I mentioned a couple of times, I was at that retreat last week. I did an article about it recently, and I think that was my last podcast as well. I kind of stepped into the old arena of life, and a guy came up and goes, hey, I really like your podcast. I don't listen to every episode, but I subscribe and listen to it. I enjoy it. And you know what? That meant a ton to me. I didn't know he listened to it. I didn't know it had an impact. I don't do it necessarily. I don't do it for kudos because there's not a lot of kudos out there most of the time. But you're going to have an impact. And as you gradually build that audience, the thing you say has the opportunity to encourage. And listen, at this stage, guys, I'm going to give you this. Please create podcasts that are encouraging. There's a big enough pool of people creating discouraging podcasts. You might draw a crowd, but I just don't know if we need any more. Really, I think we need encouraging, uplifting, talking to good folks. There's criticisms that can be offered, and I do my fair amount of that, but I'm doing my best to offer encouraging content, even when I make a criticism. Like, for example, the episode a couple of weeks ago, well, what's wrong with Peloton? I love Peloton. I love the impact it's making. I love marketing, but they got to fix their marketing. They really do. So there inherently, there's a bit of a criticism in there, but I'm not attacking anybody. It's like, hey, how can this be improved? So when you have a podcast, people are going to enjoy it. You may never know who they are, but just know that every one of those numbers represents a person. Number 5, you will grow as a person. If you do this regularly, that's what's going to happen. I mean, I look at, like I said, I'm almost at 4 years. This is 400 episodes. I can think not only about my personal growth as a person, I've grown behind the mic. I've grown in some positions and convictions. Because listen, new data means new facts, right? We don't know what we don't know. And when you learn new things, the logical response is to change the views we have. Doesn't mean we're wishy-washy. You should hold your beliefs firmly. But doing this will cause you to grow. And when you interview people, what you're saying is, I want your perspective. I want to hear what you have to say. And that's going to cause you to grow as a person if you're open-minded and you got an open heart. And I can definitely say that. I'll leave this one a blank, but I did an interview with someone around year 2 and found out some things about them that just really weren't that great. And I had to go back and take that episode down. At that time, I enjoyed the interview, but new facts means new positions. And I grew from that. It also means that I think a lot harder about the podcast interviews. And it just happens. It just does. But new facts should always represent new beliefs, new feelings. And if you do this regularly, you will grow as a person. And listen, isn't that what we want? If we're not growing, we're dying. There's not a middle place in there. We're either growing every day or we're dying or going forward or we're going backwards. This is a great platform. If you want to do it, and it's funny, I didn't mean to turn this into if you want to do a podcast, do it, but it's really my reflections on it. And so I'd have to say, if you do this, you are going to grow. Halfway there, number 6. This is not a pathway to quick money unless you already have fans. When we hear, like one of my favorite podcasts is Smartless. And so that is Sean Hayes and Jason Bateman and Will Arnett. Those guys crack me up. And it's really well produced. The 3 of them are funny. And the shtick of the whole podcast is that one of them brings on a guest and the other 2 don't know that they're going to be on there. They debuted on their first episode with tons of sponsors. Well, of course. They already have a platform. They already have built-in fans. They're part of, I'm not mistaken, I think the Wonderly Network. And so they're making money off their podcast. Yes, if you go with a company like Anchor, they're going to provide sponsors for you, but you're not going to make a bunch of money doing this. You will be able to market services, and it might, for example, I'm here at Pohanka Nissan, and they're able to give a wider, a wider exposure to who they are and their brand. But more than likely, you as the podcaster are really not going to make money. I will be 100% transparent with you. After nearly 4 years and 400 episodes, I'm around $200. And I've never spent it. It just sits in this bank. Why am I going to do anything with that? If I ever need it, I'll get it. Thankful for that bit of money I made. But please, please, please don't think this is the quick route to making money. Very few things are a quick route to making money, despite promises. You might make a little, and one day I might cash out that $200 and take Amy and I out on an incredible dinner. But more than likely, you're going to have to get into thousands and thousands of subscribers and then get people who want to pay you to be a sponsor on the show to make any money off of it. It's a worthwhile goal. I love big goals. Big goals require massive action. Massive action usually has massive results. But this platform takes time, especially if you are a relative unknown. So please don't be discouraged by it, but it's not a quick pathway to make a lot of money. It's just really not. So, and I think I've been telling you guys, I've been around $200 for a while now. It's just going to take a little bit. But like I said, one day, Amy and I are going to go out an incredible meal with all my riches from podcasting. So we're getting there. Number 7. Similar to growth, but it opens your eyes to insight. It's a little different than growth. What I mean by that is you're going to be exposed, if you interview people, and I think even if it's a solo format, you're going to be exposed to people who have a different perspective than you. Even if you line up ideologically or politically or theology-wise, whatever the case may be, as soon as you sit down with someone and ask them their questions, you're going to get insight. And if you're not combative and if you're not going after them, you get a chance to learn from them in ways that you just can't imagine. When I've had a chance to speak to people about my epilepsy or other conditions that people might have, it it makes a difference. It really, really does. I mean, I've had the privilege to talk to people about OCD and Lyme disease and cancer. And you know what? I get a chance to learn from them. And I'm thankful for folks like Megan Newkirk and Angela Rivers and others who've been willing to open up and share about what's going on in their life. And it gives me insight. And so at times I thought I was going to be giving people insight about epilepsy, and I think I have. I've done, I don't know, a dozen episodes about it over the course of 4 years. But when I get to talk to them, they share with me. And guys, insight into other people grows us. It really does. But this platform, what I've learned, is it opens me to insight. And so I also get that after the fact. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, did you think about this? Or why didn't you talk about that? Sometimes it didn't fit the scope. But sometimes I'm like, you're right. And sometimes I've had to come back and do follow-up episodes and said, you know what? Since this last episode was published, I've learned this. And so it gives you, especially in an interview format, you are going to get incredible insight. But you're going to find that if you're speaking behind the mic every single week, you're going to find new insight into yourself. You really will. Because sometimes you find yourself processing out loud. Especially I do, because I don't work with a script. And so this is the most notes I've ever had for an episode, but it's helpful. I mean, I'm discovering things even as I share these things with you. Are we getting close? That was 7. 3 more. Number 8, it will expand the reach of your brand. If you have a product or a service, or even if your brand is promoting yourself, it is an opportunity. I mean, people will ask, oh, you have a podcast? What's the name of it? And then you get a chance to share it, and people will find out. Now, this isn't specifically a marketing podcast. We talk about that. You can find that at Capitalize Your Best, and we're getting ready to have our 4th season over there. That podcast is not every single week like this one. That one works, on a season-by-season basis. And at Capitalize Your Best, the first season was called Corona Business. We launched that in the midst of the quarantine. But there I was doing marketing and consulting, and I got a chance to speak to what was going on in businesses in the day-to-day. And so now people know that I own Capitalized Marketing, and one of the things that we talk about here, faith, family, fitness, and finances, is when we get to that finance aspect, we do talk about business. We do. And so when you sit behind the microphone, you get to be the expert. Even if you're purely from a perspective of asking people questions, you get to raise the awareness of your brand. You do. I think I've got a number 11 here. We'll get to it in a minute. But if you would like to increase exposure, if you're looking for that extra social media content, or if you're looking for that extra thing on your website, launching a podcast will do that for you. I'll get you that extra tip in a minute, but it will raise the awareness of your brand. Almost done. Number 9, it's going to help you think through your own positions. So I've mentioned a couple of things personally. It's going to help you grow. It's going to give you insight into others, but you're going to have to wrestle with your own positions. Before you start broadcasting what you have to say to the world, because it's out there, you've got to think through, am I speaking to this logically? Is there information out there I haven't considered? Do I know this well enough to do a podcast on it? If I've got 400 episodes, I've got 400 I've chosen not to do. I mean, I keep a list of ones to do, and I've even started some and got into it and thought, I'm not aware of enough of this. I just need to stop this right now. And so, but you will think through your own positions. Even if your podcast is light and cheerful, which I'm all for, you may find yourself thinking through insights on some of those issues. And you're going to find yourself challenged with them personally before you sit behind the mic. So if you want to think through your own insights, then you will grow, and then you're going to find yourself exposed to other people's insights, which is really helpful. This platform has helped me grow as a person, and I'm thankful. Number 10, you become like the news. Seriously. I had a bunch of people ask me about the Peloton. They're like, hey, that looks like good content for a podcast. And I was like, you know what? Their market share is dropping. Their CEO's going to wind up having to go. They're losing so much money. They're halting production on their cycles. You're right. And someone said, hey, you should do an episode on it. And so you become week to week, depending how often you publish an episode, you become a little bit like the news. And listen, The news day in, day out is just dreadful for our brain as we watch it. It's so awful. It really is. Rarely will it encourage. But if you do this regularly, people are going to tune into you. And they're going to subscribe to your podcast. And it'll give you a news-like effect in other people. It's going to make you think really hard about what you have to say because you have an effect. All right, there's my 10. I'm going to go through them in a minute, but I've got number 11 for you. I've got number. It's been one I meant to put on here. So this is a bonus one. And this is just advice. If you're going to podcast, you have to do it regularly. Like, you can't stop. You really can't. You've got to do it every week. Or when you promise to deliver, or if you're on a season or a schedule, you've got to let people know when that is. So the reason we do Capitalize Your Best in Seasons is I just can't run 2 full-time podcasts right now. So I'll say, hey, we're going to do 6 episodes in this season. We're going to take a break. Here, it is every single week. It used to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and people could tune into it. But then I changed it to Monday to let people know. But it's got to happen. In this history, I've only repeated 1 episode ever. So even if it means I'm only putting out a 6 or 7 minute episode, if it doesn't show up in the box, people forget about you. So on Monday, I know which podcasts are going to be there. And at some point in time, I'll go, what happened to them? Hopefully. And then all of a sudden, if one pops up, I might be curious. But if you want to have success in this platform, you've got to be consistent. And you just got to keep it up. It really is the greatest key to your success. So let me run through those real quick, guys. And I'm going to wrap up real quick here. Real quick. If you don't take yourself too seriously, you're going to have a blast. I've had a blast doing this for 400 episodes. 2, but if you're honest, you're going to get some negative and perhaps even hateful feedback. So you got to be ready for that. 3, you can meet some cool folks. I have met some wonderful folks in this whole process. 4, if you listen, people will listen, and appreciate that you've never known. People are going to listen. You're not going to know them, but it's really fun when you find out, oh, you listened to the episode? 5, you're going to grow as a person. 6, it is not the pathway to quick cash. It's a long, long road to make money doing this. 7, it's going to open your eyes to new insight into other people, which is wonderful. 8, it's going to expand the reach of your brand if you want to get yourself or your company out there. It gives you an opportunity for that. 9, it's going to help you think through your own positions. And 10, you become like the news. And bonus tip for everybody is you've got to be consistent if you want to do this. Well, guys, as always, as my friend Nancy tells me, I hope I didn't talk too fast. I know I always get excited, and at some point in time I did. But thank you so much. I'm glad that this is just getting me ready for the next 400. I hope that the sound and the video quality was appreciated. Hopefully we can do this more often. And again, thank you. If you like this, please like it, subscribe to it, review it, maybe throw it up on your stories. Let other people know that you enjoy this podcast. If you've got podcast ideas or interview ideas, don't hesitate to message me when I post this on Facebook or on Instagram, wherever it may be. I appreciate you being here so far for the journey, and I really hope that I get to interact with you more and more. I've already got some podcast episodes queued up that I think are going to be fantastic, and as always, I'm chasing that big whale of an interview. We'll see if it happens or not. Thank you so much. Thanks to Shane Dale for being the great producer on this. I'm going to have her on the show at some point in time. Thank you, Pahanka Nissan, for letting me use the recording studios, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks, friends. Bye-bye.